What happens when gamers boycott video games? Usually nothing. It's kind of funny. There can be this big, huge movement on social media to boycott a video game, and then a game will just break records across the board. But there are some cases where a boycott actually does work, and we're going to talk about those, but I would say more often than not, usually nothing happens or some memes happen at best. Like for example, let's talk about 2009 and Modern Warfare 2, the big Call of Duty game, one that a lot of people look back fondly at and a lot argue is maybe one of the best Call of Duties of all time. But believe it or not, there was a group boycotting Modern Warfare 2's release, and it wasn't because of the airport level, it was something entirely different. You see, back in 2009, when Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 was nearing its release, the developer Infinity Ward announced that the PC version of the game would not support dedicated servers. Instead, all matches would run through IWNet, which was a peer-to-peer matchmaking system, pretty much what most of us experienced on the console side of things. So if anything, this was just making Modern Warfare 2 more uniform to how the rest of the series had been going, but before this, Call of Duty 4 and even World at War had dedicated servers, which meant that anybody could host their own servers. There was custom maps and mods, there were admin tools, community-controlled servers. There was a lot of options for different internet connections that were more stable. And I think it also made it where like functioning with clan systems and trying to find places so you could log your games was a little bit easier by having like a specific server that you knew someone on the other end wasn't like lag switching. Server browsers and dedicated servers were a really big deal for PC players, and for this to not be a part of Modern Warfare 2 on the PC, it was really, really odd.
This resulted in players forming multiple Steam groups in order to protest Modern Warfare 2 not having dedicated servers.
It was people pledging to not buy the game unless dedicated servers were restored.
There was also a petition that reached over 250,000 signatures.
This was a huge movement, and it was picked up by news outlets across the board. Activision was getting some heat, and I mean, some of the reasons were justified. I mean, they were prioritizing just having parity with the console version of the game over PC features that had been there. They were trying to, corner the system so that nobody could mod the game, because World at War modded servers were really, really popular. I mean, look at what Custom Zombies ended up turning into. And then, of course, Modern Warfare 2 was a full-price game, but with less features than the previous titles, technically, by losing this core feature. So what happened with this huge boycott? Absolutely nothing. When Modern Warfare 2 finally released, the boycott collapsed almost immediately. There was this screenshot that circulated around where people had looked into the members of the Boycott Modern Warfare 2 Steam group, and on launch day, look at that. A bunch of them were playing Modern Warfare 2 on launch night, including several of the original organizers of the group. This meant that all of a sudden, the biggest meme was of the group itself making itself look bad by not even staying committed to their boycott group. They couldn't wait. The night the game came out, they were playing it. And you know what? Modern Warfare 2 sales broke a ton of records, which did prove that the outrage didn't really impact Activision's bottom line. And I think this is a great jumping off point. It's a classic example of a failed boycott in gaming history, and I think back then, some people maybe realized that gamers themselves don't have a whole lot of leverage against major publishers' business decisions, and, it did start this ongoing feud. However, Black Ops, the next game, did have server browsers again, so maybe they did listen. Probably not. It was probably just the different development team building off of World at War. Another interesting example is with Borderlands. I know Borderlands 4 just released, but let's back up to when Borderlands 3 was gearing up to release, because there was some controversy because Borderlands 3 was setting up a PC exclusivity deal that a lot of players didn't like. And a lot of people called for people not to buy Borderlands 3 because of this deal that had been organized. Back in April 2019, it was announced Borderlands 3 would launch on PC as a timed exclusive to the Epic Games Store for 6 months before it would later be released on Steam. This was kind of in a weird era though, where it seemed like every video game company was getting their own launcher, everybody was trying to get their own store, and exclusivity deals just feel very anti-consumer because essentially you're forced to download a store or go through a different system than how you want to just play your game just because of some weird back-end deal going on. I personally like all my games in one place, so it not being on Steam is just inconvenient. I don't know. I just never really liked the Epic Games Store to begin with, but I mean, I wasn't, big on Borderlands Borderlands either, so I wasn't affected by this, but I can understand the outrage. Now, outlets did report on this boycott a little bit, but some of the outlet headlines were a little, I don't know, a little heated, like this one. Steam players have a tantrum over Borderlands 3's 6-month Epic Store exclusivity. Did they have to use the word tantrum? I feel like it was fair backlash. Nonetheless, the backlash did end up resulting in a lot of different things happening, outcome-wise at least. Like, review bombs started to happen on some of the older Borderland games. There were calls to boycott the game, a lot of them actually, but I think that nothing ended up really coming from it, as the game still sold well despite the reviews and the game itself being a little weird, to be honest. Later on, interestingly enough, Epic Games was doing this whole lawsuit thing with Apple, remember, over Fortnite and the whole marketplace stuff and all of that. A lot of information about how Epic Games does business ended up being released in legal disclosures, and in those legal disclosures, it was revealed that Epic paid $146 million to 2K to lock in this exclusivity deal, which is an insane amount of money. That is almost fronting the entire cost of development on Borderlands 3, because on the developer side of things, Gearbox Software had later reports that would come out that indicated that potentially development and marketing costs reportedly may have cost up to $140 million, which meant that Epic Games paid for the development costs and then some. Now, it wasn't just a deal on just Borderlands that was made, though. This deal did have more. It was like an $80 million sales guarantee. There was $15 million put in for marketing, and $20 million as a non-recoupable fee. And then there was like a $31 million deal that was also made for free games coming from Gearbox Software's catalog that then Epic Games would give out for free. So it was a loaded deal, and I don't really understand how the ins and outs of all of that work, but the reports suggest that a lot of money was exchanged, and in turn, Gearbox profited, even if the game wasn't all that great. Ultimately, though, despite the fact that there were calls for boycotting, it seemed like from the start it probably wasn't going to succeed, because most of the PC players who would both see the issue and then care enough to hold out from purchasing on a game series that they would otherwise be interested in until the game would eventually release on Steam, it's kind of a very specific niche group. You know, there was even articles out there, like Forbes did an article where they were even trying to question how far the backlash would actually go and how much it could impact the game. And ultimately, Borderlands 3 still sold pretty strongly. It ended up becoming one of the faster selling games that 2K had published, so the economic pressure that was faced from this boycott was probably pretty minimal, and a lot of the gamers who initially voiced boycott threats ended up buying the game anyways. This seems to be an ongoing trend here, so I don't think there's as much collective bargaining power when people buy the game anyways. And honestly, the fact that they were able to lock in this guaranteed payout, and then they would continue to make money from other types of individual sales, and then beyond that, console sales, they were going to be making bank in a pretty good way for them. And then the game eventually came out on Steam anyways, so I don't know, a lot of people bought it on Steam, and they got the money that way, just delayed, which honestly, having a stream of income months later when it finally does release might actually be a good strategy. I don't know. I think it's wild that Epic Games was offering that kind of money, to be honest, for exclusivity. Actually, those court disclosures even showed that at the time of this deal going through, Epic Game Store was not profitable, and it was just this expectation that they were going to be able to become profitable years down the line, but they were trying to get people on their platform first. So I guess they're willing to dish out some serious cash. But I mean, they had that Fortnite money though, so who cares for them? That was just like a drop in the bucket. Dang, what did Fortnite do to the industry?
Helldivers II, despite being a banger of a game, actually had a massive but short-lived boycott that actually worked. Let me back up a little bit though. When Helldivers II launched on PC in early 2024, the requirement to link a PlayStation Network account was made optional because of server issues and the unsuspected success that the game saw. Technically, from the beginning, the requirement to link a PSN account was in the end-user license agreement that you agree to when starting the game for the first time. A few months go by like this with the optional account linking being enabled, but then on the first Thursday of May, Sony announces that the grace period for not linking a PlayStation account is ending in a few weeks, and linking it would become mandatory in order to continue playing the game. Right away, tons of people called this out for multiple reasons. PSN is not officially available in over 170 countries, meaning players from there would lose access to the game. Like, people in those regions wouldn't be able to make an account and then link it to the game, so they would lose access to a game they had been able to play for multiple months up until then. Sony also straight up pulled the game from sale in 177 countries. Players in PSN supported regions also didn't like that they were being forced to make a third-party account to play a game on Steam. Something not uncommon, but still, we all know know, Steam players rightfully like to keep their games completely on Steam. And I mean, personally, I'm one of those people. I like to have everything on Steam. Also, people brought up that the PlayStation Network had a lot of data breaches over the years, and they didn't want to give Sony their personal information because they don't trust them with it. So shortly after the announcement and the initial reaction, Helldivers 2 was review bombed on Steam, receiving over 300,000 negative reviews in a single weekend, temporarily tanking the game's overall rating to overwhelmingly negative. Also, Steam began issuing refunds to players, often ignoring the usual 2-hour playtime limit due to the policy change making the game unplayable for many. But all this led to Sony announcing that it had listened to the community's feedback and was reversing the mandatory PSN account linking requirement for PC players. And this all just happened in one weekend. It lasted from Thursdays, where the initial announcement was made, to Sundays, when Sony backpedaled. And by Monday, the negative Steam reviews started getting reversed, and a lot of people deleted their negative reviews, and it saw a huge influx of positive reviews. This is a rare case of a boycott actually working pretty efficiently and quickly, and the account linking is still optional today.
Hogwarts Legacy is a really goofy example of a large video game boycott that did have like a lot of ripples that came from it. Now, Hogwarts Legacy released in early 2023 and was supposed to kind of be a huge deal. It was the first big budget open world Harry Potter game where you actually got to explore Hogwarts somewhat freely. But before it launched, it weirdly enough became one of the most politically charged games in years. The controversy wasn't really about the gameplay itself, it was about its association with J.K. Rowling, the creator and author of the Harry Potter universe. Over the previous few years, Rowling had made a series of comments on social media that are kind of viewed as transphobic. And even though she wasn't directly involved in the game's development, some fans argued that buying Hogwarts Legacy still financially supports her since she earns royalties from the franchise. This in turn led to widespread calls to boycott the game, especially on social media like Twitter, Reddit, TikTok. There was the hashtag boycott Hogwarts Legacy that was trending for weeks, and some creators and journalists urged other players not to play or stream the game to show solidarity with trans people. But from there, things kind of started to spiral. As the release date approached, Hogwarts Legacy kind of turned into this weird litmus test. It wasn't just the game anymore, it was more a political statement whether you played the game or not. Some people who just wanted to play the game were labeled as supporting hate, while others said that refusing to play it was just virtue signaling, which in itself is harmful. This turned into a pretty big miniature culture war moment in the gaming realm, I guess. When the game launched, Twitch streamers who streamed Hogwarts Legacy faced a lot of harassment campaigns that were going on, getting brigaded in chat or in social media just for playing the game. And then things escalated when a few streamers had breakdowns on their live stream or would turn off their live stream because of all the backlash. And to be fair, small streamers who don't get a lot of chat interactions anyways, finally getting a lot of chat interaction and attention just to get a lot of hate because of the game they're playing, I can see how the pressure of that causes a breakdown in more of a scope than someone who's used to having a chat that, talks about stuff and occasionally flames them and trolls them. So I understand these breakdowns don't necessarily feel like they just completely came out of nowhere. I can see there being more pressure streaming to any audience size for the first time and then getting a bunch of hate because of the game you're playing. There were also websites that would come up and different lists that were circulating around that would list off all the people who were playing the game. And I think most people, even the people who were boycotting the game at one point or another, kind of was all right, some of y'all are going a little too far with this. It's fine to boycott the game because we don't want to support it, but I don't know, putting out digital hits on people over what game they're playing is defeating the whole purpose of boycotting the game. Now, in the end, the boycott didn't really hurt the game all that much commercially. It did spark discussions and ethics and consumer choices and I guess creator accountability and limits of online activism. There's some lines that need to maybe be drawn, but some players do decide to skip the game on principle. Others still played it and still supported trans rights, and others just wanted to explore Hogwarts without even worrying about the debate. So it's a wild one that happened, and it's interesting that it blew up to become so big for a little while and then nobody ever talked about it again. Let's talk about one of the biggest video game controversies of all time, which comes all the way back in the 1990s. Did you ever play the Sega CD?
No. I think I only played the Sega Saturn over at a friend's house one time. That's it.
That's your only Sega experience?
I think so, yeah.
The Sega CD was interesting because there was a controversial game called Night Trap. And even if you haven't played the Sega CD, you probably have heard of Night Trap because of how politically charged this game ended up being. Night Trap was a 1992 FMV video, which stands for full motion video. It released for the Sega CD, and essentially the gameplay is kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's, except not at all, but you monitor these hidden cameras throughout a house, and you have to protect a teenage girl from vampire attacks. Or these things are like vampires, they're called augurs, and you have to like trap them in the house using the house's security system. It was supposed to be like a parody of like those campy B horror movies, not like realistic or like super gory or anything like that. But when the game released, parents and politicians used this game as like a springboard to accuse video games as a whole as encouraging violence and sexual exploitation against women. This exploded when other games are also coming under fire, like Mortal Kombat, and there was a US Senate hearing in December of 1993, which was led by Senators Joe Lieberman and Herb Kohl, who cited Night Trap as like a prime example alongside Mortal Kombat as an example of graphic violence and sexual content in video games marketed towards children. They even pointed out, like, look at this scene. She's wearing a nightgown and being attacked or restrained, which, mind you, taken out of context, this clip could look way more sinister than it really was. In game, you're actually saving the girls. You're not like controlling the vampires. But the controversy didn't stop there. There were a lot of calls from like parent advocate groups to boycott this and all video games, but specifically Night Trap and Mortal Kombat. So Toys R Us and KB Toys actually pulled the game from shelves, and a lot of religious groups and like parent groups also called for boycotts against Sega as a whole, arguing that the company was selling filth to children. This game, alongside games like Mortal Kombat, single-handedly caused this domino effect where the ESRB ended up getting created so that video games would have a rating system in place for all future game releases starting in the mid-90s. But this controversy did help Night Trap's sales a little bit, and to this day, it's still kind of a collector's item. And then the lore gets even deeper here. During all of this, Nintendo was also brought in because Nintendo obviously put out games and they were talking about how they're different than all the other gamer companies. They care about family values, and they pointed out that games like Mortal Kombat are toned down. But at the same time, Howard Lincoln, who is the chairman of Nintendo of America, told the senators Joseph Lieberman and Herbert Kohl that Night Trap would never appear on a Nintendo game system. Like, that was on the books. Night Trap is banned from Nintendo, period.
And let me say that for the record, I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system.
But still, at the very least, Night Trap, while maybe not being that great of a game to begin with because it was reviewed pretty negatively, did get this like cult following just because of the historical context of it. There was a Kickstarter in like 2014 to re-release the game at like a higher resolution. They wanted like $330,000 and they raised $39,000. So that didn't work. There was like a couple of project attempts over the years. And then finally, a Night Trap 25th anniversary edition was announced in 2017 to commemorate the game's 25th anniversary. It released on PlayStation 4 and Windows. And then finally, in 2018, the anniversary edition was released on Nintendo Switch, which is crazy that after all these years, 26 years later, Night Trap did make it onto a Nintendo console. And then on top of that, Limited Run's game just decided like for April Fools, they were going to announce and release a Game Boy Advance port of Night Trap, which you could order just for that weekend. And the Game Boy Advance isn't actually a game, it's just all of the FMV videos played out. But it's for the Game Boy Advance. So, I mean, that's something.
One thing that seems to be a factor with the boycotts from the 90s and early 2000s is that there was this notion that video games were specifically for kids. Nowadays, obviously, it's more known that there's plenty of games for every type of age group, but nonetheless, this notion in the 90s and 2000s caused a lot of trouble for GTA. With the success of Grand Theft Auto, there was a lot of eyes on it, and a lot of calls to boycott the game over different things came up over the years. Firstly, the violence that you can commit in the game was always a big talking point, and it had real-life consequences for the franchise starting as early as GTA 3. In 2001, GTA 3 had to be censored to release in Australia, France and Germany because of its content. Vadim M actually made a video showing a lot of the differences, but it's sometimes almost comical the way they censored stuff. Like in the normal version of GTA, you can kick someone who's down in a fist fight, Obviously not a good thing to do in real life, but it's just a video game. Nonetheless, in the censored Australian version, your character just keeps punching the air. And there's a lot of small things like this that were changed. I actually have a story relating to this. When I was growing up in Germany, the uncensored version was a rare find, and a friend had a version from the UK, which was the uncensored version, and I really wanted it. So I traded Mario Kart on the Wii, including the steering wheel, for GTA 3, which in hindsight was dumb, but I still have that copy of the game sitting on my shelf. The next public outcry or boycott came with Vice City, but this time from Miami and South Florida. Cuban and Haitian community associations openly spoke out against the game and the depictions of gangs in Miami. Like, I found this old CNN interview where someone said they made money out of the blood and tears of a whole nation. Like, this was very traumatic, and a lot of people saw this game as like a direct attack on their culture. I mean, not much came of the actual boycott. There was once again a censored version of Vice City that was made for certain markets, which I actually own the censored version of Vice City from Germany. Obviously, GTA boycotts didn't stop there, and the most infamous one came with GTA San Andreas and the hot coffee mod. So basically, in the game files, there was a mini-game that was accessible through modding that was about intense canoodling. Even though it was only available through modding, it was still content on the disc, which led to the ESRB to give the game an adult-only rating, which then caused major retailers to drop the sales of the game because of the very common policy to not sell adult-only games. This was all over the news, it made massive headlines at the time, and Rockstar would eventually release like a version with the files removed, and that was, re-rated and then was put up for normal sale. And I think after years of this, GTA 4 actually, was pretty harmless, and there wasn't any major public outrage over it, at least not to the size of, the previous ones. But once GTA 5 came out, the calls for boycott and the public outrage once again started up. There was multiple things that people called out about GTA 5. Like during the mission By the Book, there's a torture scene, and that caused human rights groups and the media to call for a boycott of GTA 5. I was kind of weird about it. It's not like they were trying to protect the kids at this point. They were just like, this is too violent for anyone to see. Then once again, there was complaints about the violence you could commit against women in the game, and I mean, that's always been part of the game, but news sites like Kotaku chimed in and called it problematic. Also, the inclusion of transgender ladies of the night and the depiction of them were called out as harmful and stereotypical, and actually some of their content did end up getting removed by Rockstar with the re-releases for PlayStation 5 and Xbox in 2022. But even with all those calls to boycott the game, GTA 5 was the most successful GTA game of all time, and there wasn't a major successful boycott at all. I don't even think any of this put a dent in the sales of the game. The only thing that really happened with GTA 5 in real life was that in Australia, retailers like Target and Kmart stopped selling the game in late 2014, but like that was a year after the release and digital sales were already very common, so I don't think this was a massive loss for Rockstar. It doesn't stop there though. Jumping to like right now in 2025, there is one more boycott that is kind of forming, and it's ongoing right now and developing as I'm speaking. So I'm gonna kind of have to work with the information I have right now. There might be more information after the video, so keep that in mind. Basically, recently there was a report that Rockstar fired 30 to 40 developers, which critics of this said that this was a union-busting tactic. Like they fired those people in order to not have them be able to unionize. Rockstar denied this and said that it was because the employees leaked stuff on Discord. Right now, what I can tell, people are mostly taking a stance against Rockstar, saying that they were definitely union busting. So this and some, other internal issues that some developers brought up about crunch and company cultures led to people calling for a boycott of GTA and Rockstar products right now. And obviously, this includes GTA 6, which now is releasing in November of 2026. They delayed it like once again 2 hours before I'm recording this, so I guess lots of GTA news this morning. Because also this morning a protest broke out outside of the Rockstar Games offices in Edinburgh and the Take-Two London headquarters. And people straight up showed up with like picket signs and, slogans and stuff, and there's footage of them protesting. And that's kind of the latest thing as of now. As I've said, it's still developing and ongoing. So if there's anything major that happens sometime soon, I will pin an update in the comments down below, and you'll be able to read up on it.
Do you guys remember the game Atomic Heart? It's mostly known for those two robots that like did arts and crafts or something in that one room in the campaign. I mean, not really, but that circulated pretty heavily. Now, when Atomic Heart launched in 2023, it did catch quite a bit of attention because it had this like Soviet era sci-fi shooter-esque experience, heavily inspired by like BioShock or Prey. It had these like really surreal visuals, a really exciting soundtrack from Mick Gordon. Like that's hype. But right before before the game released, it kind of got a lot of controversy surrounding it, not because of the gameplay again, but because of who made this game and where it came from. You see, the developer Moonfish is based in Cyprus, but was founded by a team with Russian roots. And since the game released almost exactly a year after Russia, invaded Ukraine, some fans and critics began asking questions: would the game's profits directly or indirectly support the Russian government or companies under sanction? Adding to that suspicion, Moonfish's communications were kind of vague. They described the studio as international, but wouldn't clearly state whether they were paying taxes in Russia or whether Russian investors were involved in the game. A few outlets reported connections between the publisher and state-linked entities like VK Play or Gazprom subsidiaries, though nothing was definitively proven, so it was still really, really vague across the board. Then the setting itself, takes place in an alternate history USSR where communism thrives through robotics, and some argued that this, tied with all of the questionable funding of the game and backing of the game and where the profits would go to, kind of also made a game that romanticized Soviet imagery during a time where, real world government is kind of outright waging war. Others saw it as stylized world building, a sci-fi what if scenario, not necessarily propaganda. So what did Ukraine have to think about this game? Well, Ukrainian officials and media outlets like Dev UA and Focus UA called for boycotts of the game, asking players not to support a project with potential Russian ties. Even Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Digital Transformation advised avoiding the game until the studio clarified its funding. This spiraled in online, where a boycott call spread under the hashtag #BoycottAtomicHeart, though many players outside of Eastern Europe argued that the link to Russian state funding wasn't proven and the game's art shouldn't be punished for politics. Meanwhile, another side of the controversy emerged where some critics said that parts of the writing were kind of tone deaf or sexist, pointing to humor and objectified robot designs and those robots doing arts and crafts all over again. But the main focus of the boycott stayed pretty political. Should you play a game that might benefit a country that's currently waging war? Despite the controversy, Atomic Heart actually performed pretty alright commercially. It did launch as a day one Xbox Game Pass game, and that meant it reached millions of players pretty quickly. Moonfish ended up denying any ties to the Russian government and said it was a pro-peace organization opposing violence against any person. So, in the end, I don't think the boycott did much to tank sales, but it was interesting to see the implications of just not clarifying certain things right away, especially when there's real world things going on, and there's a lot of things that consumers have to think about when they're spending money, even on things like games. Genshin Impact. When this game released in 2020, it became one of the biggest global mobile hits, especially in the free-to-play realms, and the Chinese studio MiHoYo, it's now HoYoverse, really just set a new standard for mobile games. But there was a big boycott movement that spread for Genshin pretty early on, prior to the launch of the game. You see, before Genshin Impact became one of the biggest games, it was already getting famous or infamous for how mad some people got. Back in 2019, when the game was first shown off at China Joy, a massive gaming expo that's held in Shanghai, players kind of noticed something familiar about the game. It has this open world and gliders and climbing systems and a stamina bar, and it looks a whole lot like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild that just came out 2 years earlier. This led to a lot of Nintendo fans saying that Genshin Impact was kind of a blatant ripoff of one of the newest and most beloved open world games that was out there. And a lot of people on social media started saying that the game was just a shameless copy of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, like a knockoff, accusing MiHoYo of stealing Nintendo's ideas, and the controversy ended up reaching a boiling point at this actual convention where the game was being demoed publicly. So, as it turns out, allegedly, I couldn't find a video of this happening, but there's more than one report saying that some dude was so mad at this game existing, he destroyed his PlayStation 4 in protest of Sony's promotion of Genshin Impact at the expo. And then a bunch of people stood near the expo, holding their Nintendo Switches up in the air in solidarity. And then there was people just saying don't play the game because it is just a Chinese knockoff of Zelda. And I don't know, this was just funny. The idea of someone just smashing their PlayStation because they're so upset about a game existing. Nonetheless, people have done it over Call of Duty, so why is this any different? It's not, or maybe it is. I don't know. But Genshin Impact ended up making like the most revenue in any mobile game throughout the next couple of years. So I don't know if this boycott really did anything at all. And next, I want to briefly touch on a more recent boycott, but it's not really like all that like quirky. It's just like a real world thing where companies are being scrutinized for where their funding goes and how money is distributed. So there's been a more recent boycott driven by the BDS movement, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions campaign. It's a pro-Palestinian umbrella movement which calls on individuals and companies to cut economic, cultural, and institutional ties with Israel over the things going on during the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And back in April, BDS added Microsoft and extension, the Xbox brand, to its quote-unquote priority target list. The main claim that they're making is that Microsoft is complicit in the Israeli military actions because Microsoft allegedly provides cloud, AI, and other tech services to Israeli military intelligence units. There was a report by The Guardian that asserted Microsoft's Azure cloud services were used by Israelis' defense intelligence units, including for large-scale storage and processing of intercepted communications. And then Microsoft made a public statement later saying that there's no evidence to date that its Azure or AI services were used to harm people in Gaza, and its contracts with the Israeli government are standard commercial relationships bound by their policies. But that hasn't stopped the boycott call from the BDS in any way. So the main boycott is calling for people to cancel their subscriptions and avoid purchasing Microsoft and Xbox gaming hardware or services, like buying consoles, continuing their subscription for Game Pass, playing games that are published by Microsoft like Minecraft, Call of Duty, Candy Crush. Just stop financially supporting Microsoft in any way possible. And there's calls for Microsoft to sever or radically change its business relationships with Israeli military intelligence establishments, particularly the Azure and AI services that are used by the IDF. I think a lot of people, though, in the gaming industry kind of do consider what the practical effects of this type of boycott would do, as Microsoft is massive, it's diversified, and gamers boycotting Microsoft and Xbox would probably have a very, very limited impact on the actual underlying issues that BDS is trying to highlight. This hasn't stopped conversations, though. Like, for instance, the small indie studio known as Icewater Games, they released this open world RPG game called Tenderfoot Tactics, actually ended up having their game unlisted from the Xbox store. So they straight up removed it from Xbox's store in solidarity with this boycott. And then in May of 2025, Microsoft actually made a statement saying that they were doing an external review into the allegations about how the Israel-Gaza tech is being used. So we haven't heard anything else on what's going on with that. So once again, I'm kind of in the camp where with something so politically charged with a company as large as Microsoft, like honestly just using a Windows computer, you're using Microsoft's services. It's definitely something where like boycotting is not going to change anything financially, and it's really more of just like a conversation piece. And you know, like social interaction is important if you're trying to like make a movement happen, I guess. But honestly, Xbox is just going to have people boycotting them for just the way that they're handling Xbox. I don't know if this extra call to boycotting is going to do anything. If Xbox just keeps raising their Game Pass prices, people are going to just boycott them naturally anyways. So yeah, I don't know. We're going to talk about Pokemon Sword and Shield briefly here, because if you are a Pokemon fan or not a Pokemon fan, you probably heard of the big old controversy from a few years ago known as Dexit, which is more clever than I thought. At first, I thought it's just like short for like Pokedex exit, because Pokemon Sword and Shield saw the removal of a very large portion of the overall amount of Pokemon that are literally coded into the game. In all previous generations of Pokemon games, pretty much, you could transfer your Pokemon from previous games into the new game. But if your Pokemon from the previous games weren't in the new game, you no longer could transfer them in, which is pretty dumb. As it turns out, apparently, if you follow world news, politics, and stuff like that, that I don't really follow, because I mean, there's a lot going on in the world. It's a lot to keep up with. So I just that lore I just don't, check in on. But apparently there was something in like the UK a couple years ago. Do you know, Luke? Have you ever heard of it? Like
Brexit?
Brexit.
Yeah.
It's like they left the EU or something. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like most people know more about it than I do, so we don't have to like explain it. But it's a play on that besides the name convention, because Pokemon Sword and Shield, its region was based on the UK. So there's like a double meaning, because the game's region actually is based on the geographical location that ties it all together. So Dexit's actually like one layer deeper and funnier than what I originally realized. Now, the whole idea of removing a large portion of the Pokedex is very, very stupid. I still stand by that. Even if Pokemon doubled down, that this is the right decision to make. First of all, the fact that it's called Gotta Catch 'em All, now you can't catch them all or even have them all. But like back in the 3DS era when they were jumping to like X and Y, I feel like there was a statement that was made where they're like, we did 3D modeling for all of the Pokemon, which is something that they're going to continuously use throughout the series. And they did continue to use the models, but they just still decided to cut the Pokemon out by the time Sword and Shield came out. So it's a little weird in that front. And a lot of people just boil this down to this ongoing issue that Pokemon has had for over a decade at this point, where it feels like with how successful Pokemon is, the product that is being released is not up to the standards of what Pokemon should be. Pokemon is the #1 highest selling media franchise, and it's been there for years. On average, a new Pokemon game sells about as much or more than an annual Call of Duty game. And you look at how many studios work on Call of Duty every year, and then you compare it to Pokemon where they have one studio. It's like, yo, what is going on here? And then we get a Pokemon game that releases, and fortunately enough for Pokemon, the Pokemon formula is good. So the games are fun. I'm not gonna like knock down any of the newer games because I still have a good time with them, but you can tell that the level of quality, control, and effort is not on par with what you would expect from a AAA game. I don't know. What do you think, Luke?
I think it's lazy. There's a lot of lazy aspects. They could have evolved Pokemon games a long time ago with like voice acting, maybe like some grander features, and definitely keeping all the Pokemon in the game. I feel like it's not that much to ask for.
Absolutely. And then what's interesting is Game Freak actually made an official response where Game Freak's Junichi Masuda, who's like the long-term head of Pokemon at the time, actually responded to the big Dexit backlash and calls to boycott the game by saying this, that he's read all of your comments and appreciate your love and passion for Pokemon, and reaffirmed that the decision to limit Pokemon Sword and Shield to the Galar region Pokedex was very difficult. I'd like to make one thing clear. Even if a specific Pokemon is not available in Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield, that does not mean it will not appear in future games. It's a little silly for sure. I think the backlash was warranted. The calls for boycotting was warranted. However, nobody sticks to boycotts in the gaming industry, as you guys have probably noticed from this video, because the game still sold incredibly well. And even little things like this that I would also complain about as a Pokemon fan didn't stop me from buying the game and playing the game and enjoying the game.
Actually, the first Pokemon game I beat since Gen 3.
It's tricky because it's like the fan base loses all of its leverage by, not choosing to spend their dollar where they want to, put their money where their mouth is, myself included. But like, why should you not buy something if it's going to bring you joy? Also, you know what I mean? Like, and it's stupid when people get mad at other people for not boycotting something.
I just think it's a losing battle. You can't boycott something if it's too big. That's all, yeah.
And our 7 and 8 year olds going to be reading online about Dexit and then like telling their parents they don't want the new Pokemon game because they read on Twitter that Dexit's happening. Like, absolutely not. Let's boycott the next Pokemon after the next one that comes out, because I do want to try that one.
I'll boycott Pokemon Snap 3.
Oh, come on, dude. I actually would play Snap 3 if
I didn't buy Snap 2. I boycotted Snap 2. In October of 2002, shortly before Bayonetta 3 released, Helena Taylor, who voiced Bayonetta in the first 2 games, posted a series of videos on social media where she claimed that she was offered only $4,000 as a flat fee to voice the character Bayonetta in the third one, which she took as an insult. Her franchise, she said, was worth like hundreds of millions of dollars.
The final offer to do the whole game as a buyout, a flat rate, was $4,000 US. This is an insult to me.
She kind of insinuated that is the reason they recasted her for the third game, because they didn't want to pay her more than $4,000. And then she urged fans to boycott the game.
I am asking the fans to boycott this game. If you're someone who cares about people, who cares about the world around you, who cares about who gets hurt with these financial decisions, then I urge you to boycott this game. I decided to do it to stand up in solidarity with people all over the world who do not get paid properly for their talents.
And instead donate the money to charity or something, whatever. And that quickly went viral. And I remember like every news outlet picking it up. There was like tons of headlines like, oh, how can they do this? And she laid it on like real thick with how traumatic and how bad this was.
I didn't want the world. I didn't ask for too much. I was just asking for a decent, dignified living wage. What they did was legal, but it was immoral. Fat cats cream off the top and leave us the rotten crumbs. You know, in England right now, there are nurses going to food banks to feed their children. This is not right. This is not acceptable. Bayonetta always stands up for those with less power and stands up for what is right. And in doing this, you stand with her.
Platinum Games mostly remained silent on the topic. They had just previously stated that there was various overlapping circumstances as the reason for recasting. And Jennifer Hale was the new voice actress, and she kind of like got a lot of harassment during this time as well. And she made like a vague statement saying every actor has the right to be paid well and blah, blah, blah. But during that time, or shortly after, some different reports emerged, specifically from Jason Schreier, and he said that Taylor had been offered between $15,000 and $20,000 for the role, and that the $3,000 to $4,000 were per session, and that Taylor rejected that offer, and she wanted a six-figure payment instead with a residual deal as well, meaning she would get royalties for the game. Now, in response of the reports, Taylor all of a sudden like changed her thing a little bit, and she clarified that the original offer was $1,000 in total, which was later bumped up to $15,000 according to her. But then she also said that this $4,000 offer she initially said was for the whole like voice acting role was for a cameo appearance, like for a few lines that she was supposed to record, which they offered her after she already declined the payment for the main role. And with this revelation, people were like, what the hell? This lady kind of like BS'd everyone, like kind of made it seem like they're trying to like lowball her, and they didn't really do that. They made her a decent offer, and then she didn't want that offer. She demanded like way too much, and then the narrative shifted after that, and nobody was like, oh, we're gonna boycott this anymore. She kind of just damaged her reputation, I think. Many people felt like misled, and yeah, I don't know. It seems like wild.
So how much was she supposed to get paid?
I mean, we don't know exactly, but between $15,000 to $20,000 was the original offer for 5 sessions.
You know, to me, that still sounds like a pretty lowball offer, but I think the backlash that came from it for Helena Taylor is just because of it not seeming like she was transparent from the beginning. Because I still think that that's a pretty lowball offer to be the main character protagonist for a AAA video game releasing. But when you're telling people, or you're allowing people to think, even if you're not explicitly telling people, but you're allowing people to think that the price is $4,000 in total, I can see where the backlash comes from 100%.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. But I mean, I don't know, it's for 5 days of work. You know, I mean, she didn't want it, so she turned it down. And I mean, I don't know. That's up to her, too.
I mean, how much does a normal, like, protagonist voice actor get in a AAA title?
I have no idea.
I'd assume 6 figures or more.
No idea, actually. Maybe.
Like, how much do you think Kevin Spacey got for Advanced Warfare?
I mean, sure, but he
That's true.
was also his face
Right.
and everything. They had to scan him, so that was more work.
I don't know. I mean, you're reprising a role of a popular franchise for the 3rd time. I would say I'd expect a little more than $15,000.
Yeah, maybe, but she countered with like, she went from 15,000 to like, I don't know, over 6 figures, so.
5 days of work for something that involved, but still a pretty big title. I would expect more than 15,000. Going up to 6 figures, probably a bit excessive. But I think the real takeaway is the fact that people were misled by the voice actor.
She definitely did claim that they wanted to pay her $4,000, which definitely was not true.
Right. Or she allowed people to believe. Or the wording of everything wasn't explicit enough. Would you voice act the character of Bayonetta for Bayonetta 4 for $15K?
Sure, I do it for $15. But they wouldn't sell. They wouldn't make their money back on the game, so I don't know.
I would buy it. I'm sure there's people out there who would buy it 100%. New Bayonetta game, voice actor replaced with a random small YouTuber from Germany.
I'll just give them the best female voice, and they leave it or take it, you know?
Let's hear it. Say a Bayonetta line.
Look at my gun!
Pretty good. I haven't played a Bayonetta game, so.
I didn't like the character, the way it looked.
You know, I think that too for me, or I don't know, it was something about the aesthetic, like the art design overall. It's the glasses, dude. People with glasses, you can't trust them.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a bit of a goofy one that I did want to talk about, but it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, so I'll be completely transparent here. You know the game Infinity Nikki? It's like that pink magical decorating cozy game. Full disclosure, over on my Animal Crossing channel, Rocket Elijah, I've been sponsored by them multiple times. So I do an ad read, I talk about the game. It resonates pretty well with people who like cozy Animal Crossing games. But there is a controversy around them that did cause some fans to want to boycott them. So I do want to talk about it still, even if there's a little conflict of interest. Maybe I'm a little biased in favor of the game, indirectly, subconsciously. because their marketing team has hired us a couple of times. But I still want to talk about it because I think the story itself is interesting. So back in 2025, there was a really interesting debacle. They did an update called Update 1.5, the Bubble Season, which also coincided with the launch of the game on Steam. And during this update, they did some changes to how some of the systems work. Now, this is like a free-to-play game, so obviously they have the whole gacha pulling system for different types of cosmetics and whatnot. And they had outfit structures that changed where I guess when you pulled different outfits, normally it would take like 8 or 9 pulls to get the entire outfit, like all the clothing parts for an outfit. But with the new update, some of the outfits took like 11 different pieces instead. So you'd have to pull even more pieces if you wanted to get the full collection. Then they did a new dyeing customization system that added like a new paid currency instead of just like this type of customization being earned through like in-game earnables. And then there was like launch issues on the PC and Steam version of the game. So like a lot of people were pretty dissatisfied with the state of the game when all this went down. So during this time, fans on Discord started voicing their discontent, and some fans started calling for boycotting of Infinity Nikki. In a big scale, it's a pretty minor controversy, but I think the outcome is really funny. So during the boycotting conversations, the Discord moderators on the North American Infinity Nikki Discord server actually ended up muting the word boycott on the Discord and on like their forums and like social media pages. So in response, whenever anybody wanted to talk about boycotting the game, they changed it and started calling it girl-cotting the game. And that became the trend where everybody was calling for Infinity Nikki to be girl-cotted instead of boycotted so they could get around the censorship. Big picture, this led to nothing happening. You know, there was a lot of people kind of clarifying that the boycott didn't mean you couldn't play the game. It just meant you should stop spending money on the game, stop wailing out on this free-to-play game because they are continuously like creeping the requirements to get to enjoy the game to be more financially charged. Interestingly enough, the developer did end up issuing an apology. They did like the thing where they like give you free currencies or whatever. And I guess they said they're going to like relook at how they were handling their monetization. But I did follow the gacha charts on gacha revenue just to look at like the course of this game from what's been tracked. If this all happened in April of 2025, by June of 2025, they did see a pretty significant revenue drop, actually. So I don't know if this was because of the girl controversy or it was just like the ebbs and flow of the gacha industry, but they did have their worst month ever, essentially a month after all this happened, as far as revenue sales were concerned, where they went from making about $6 million to $7 million a month to only $3.7 million. And then the next month they made $9.7 million. So it's a wild ebb and flow. But I mean, I think this just has a lot to do with just the gacha game industry as a whole. There's a lot of scrutiny over it, rightfully so, because of the way that these things can be tweaked ever so slightly that can have huge implications for how much a player has to spend. I think it's good when players are willing to voice their opinion on weird stuff happening. Do you think they're going to never sponsor Rocket Elijah again?
Maybe, but it's okay.
Dang. We'll keep you updated if they ever reach out again. Hey, Luke, remember when we were at the gym today and I kept complaining about how it felt like one of my feet or one of the shoes was slightly higher than my other shoe?
Yeah.
As it turns out, I was wearing 2 different shoes.
Okay.
I didn't realize it till we got home. Not related to the video, but it just popped in my head in that last section. So I thought I should bring it up so you can fill you in. I don't know if you need to leave this in the video.
It's definitely staying in the video. This one was a pretty big one, but I want to lead us off with saying this. At the end of 2021, there was 2 shooter games that launched. One was Halo Infinite, which was a free-to-play multiplayer, and the other one was Battlefield 2042, which was a paid game, like most Battlefields are, but it was multiplayer only, no campaign. That game already had a bunch of backlash. It also was broken at launch, features were missing, there was like a lot of stuff wrong with the game. A couple months go by, and there's like an open like town hall meeting with like EA executives, and one of them makes his big statements about how Battlefield 2042 wasn't successful because Halo Infinite launched a couple days before, and that it was a major competitor, and that essentially raised the bar so high for players in those like couple days that they didn't really want to buy Battlefield 2042 because they were so taken by the quality of Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite is not the reason Battlefield 2042 failed, and that's such a delusional take. And what I think is actually the reason is that Battlefield had tarnished its reputation over the years with certain things, and one of the biggest one was when people boycotted Battlefield 5 in 2018. You remember that time?
I do remember 2018. It was a time.
There was a big thing. So basically what happened is they announced Battlefield 5. They showed off the trailer, the reveal trailer, and there was a female British soldier with a prosthetic arm fighting on the front lines. And people were immediately like, what is this? Why? What is going on?
You don't remember that happening during World War II?
I mean, no. And maybe I was on the wrong side. I'm gonna cut that.
Don't cut it. Don't cut it.
Oh, no.
Leave it.
Okay. Anyways, so people were immediately like, this is not historically accurate. I mean, there's a historical point to be made for women in the military during World War II, but definitely not in the British Army, definitely not on the front line, and definitely not with prosthetic arms. People were like, what the hell is going on? People were like accusing them of being like pandering to certain audiences. The hashtag not my battlefield started trending pretty quickly, and a lot of people took to Twitter and stuff to were like, oh, I'm not gonna play this, boycotted. After all this speculation stuff, EA's chief creative officer Patrick Söderlund responded to this, and here's what he said: we stand up for the cause because I think those people who don't understand it, well, you have two choices: either accept it or don't buy the game. I'm fine with either or. It's such a weird thing, and like it made people even more mad. I actually think there was other things wrong with Battlefield 5. It felt like it was lacking a lot of content, and the microtransactions were kind of bad. It had the Battle Royale mode nobody asked for that was immediately dead as well. It also didn't launch with the game, that came out like later, I think. Even for hardcore Battlefield fans, Battlefield 5 was just bad, and I think that's why Battlefield in the recent years has been in hot waters before Battlefield 6, which is obviously a success and people enjoy that one. I don't even know how to touch this next one. Twitter over the years has gotten many people in trouble, and it so happened that it also got a streamer's Call of Duty skin removed from Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone at the time. So this streamer is Nick Merckx, and I mean, obviously everyone knows him, pretty famous streamer. And basically in June of 2023, there was this video going around about like some fight that broke out at a school board meeting where they debated about like Pride Month inclusion in schools and stuff. And then people started debating that, and Nick Merckx chimed in with this: they should leave little children alone. That's the real issue. And this was quickly seen by many as being anti-LGBT, equating it to harmful rhetoric that has been thrown at the community for a long time. And this led to Activision actually removing his bundle from the Call of Duty store, which had just come out 9 days before. So they removed it after 9 days of it being in the store because of this tweet that he tweeted. This then led to a bunch of counter reactions of people being like, oh, that's not good. And then Tim the Tatman also requested his skin to be removed, which they also granted his wish. And essentially it was like this boycott of Call of Duty that formed under the hashtag I stand with Nick Merckx. Lots of people complained about it, but I mean, I assume most of them just ended up playing Call of Duty anyways. I don't think actually anyone or massive amounts of people boycotted because of this. Nick Merckx made some statement saying he's not anti-LGBTQ, he just disagrees on that topic or something. Kind of like a weird story, it's almost forgotten. And Nick Merckx, I mean, he's famous for playing Call of Duty, and like, why is everybody upset that a Call of Duty bro has some dumb opinion on something? Like, I mean, isn't that to be expected? Though I gotta also say, Activision is a private company, so they can remove whatever they want from their own games. I mean, actually, the wildest thing is that Dr. Disrespect said that he's gonna boycott the game in Call of Duty until they put the skin back in the game.
I feel like they either need to apologize publicly to him or reinstate his bundle in order for me to consider playing Call of Duty again. That's where I'm at.
And I'm pretty sure he's played every Call of Duty since, and they never put the skin back in the game. So that was a wild week on Twitter.
So what do you think of these topics? Do you think we covered most of them?
Yeah, I mean, dude, I feel deeply touched by some of these stories.
I feel deeply touched too. If you guys have any other boycotting stories or video game controversies you want us to cover, let us know in the comments down below, because I do think that general video game controversies, there's a lot of like niche categories that we could cover in future videos. So if we didn't talk about the one that you really want us to talk about in this video, maybe we'll circle back to it real soon. Otherwise, thanks for watching. We've put out some banger content lately, so check that out. YouTube thinks you'll like this one. Make sure you're subscribed. Thank you to our YouTube members and Patreon members for giving us your money, and we'll see you soon with another video. Bye. Woo!